below his right knee was gone. Jinwoo's eyes reflexively shifted toward the stone statue holding the shield. He then saw the trail of blood clearly visible on the end of the shield, and the rest of his right leg was just below that. Drops of blood started falling from Ju Hui's nose. That was the sign of her reaching the limits of her physical stamina. The healing magic from a rank B healer was unable to recover missing limbs, meaning what she was doing was basically pouring water into a broken jug. Her stamina rapidly bottomed out in the end. "It's fine now, Miss Ju Hui. You can stop. I'm going to heal you. I'll fix you as good as new." Hunters stared at the two of them while forming miserable expressions. Out of the 17 who initially entered this chamber, only 6 remained now. And from this group of 6, 2 of them had suffered horrible, grievous wounds. Song had lost his arm, while Jinwoo lost his leg. They might have survived, but none of them felt like rejoicing at the moment. It was then, yet another strange noise rocked the chamber. The middle of the temple, where that strange magic formation could be found, suddenly rose up above the ground. Jinwoo inwardly thought that it had finally come. "Prove your piety, is it?" He already had a rough idea as to what those words could mean. The circular magic formation in the center of the temple began rising up noisily and only stopped after reaching the height of a couple of steps. An altar. Hunters displayed alert reactions as soon as Jinwoo muttered out, "An altar? He just said it's an altar." The person who had rescued them from the 2 preceding crises was not some high-ranked hunter, but rank E Jinwoo, who used to be the butt of their jokes most of the time. If it weren't for Mr. Seong, all of us would have been. Hunters were thinking this exact same thought. Under the current circumstances, Jinwoo's words were their lifeline. And now that Jinwoo had muttered out a word, altar. Kim always was quick on the uptake, and so he caught on to the meaning first before anyone else had the chance to do so. "I get it now. I see how it is." Kim then unsheathed the sword hanging on his hips. Now originally, this weapon would be used to cut various monsters down, but for now, it'd have to be utilized for a different purpose altogether. Even if I'm a dumb beastard, I can more or less get what you're trying to say here. Hunters nervously swallowed their saliva while looking at the sharp, coldly gleaming blade. "Oh ye, Mr. Kim, why are you pulling your sword out like that?" "Why don't we talk about this first? Let's talk first." The highest-ranked member among the group, rank C Hunter Song, was heavily injured, meaning there was no one here that could potentially stop Kim, who boasted a pretty powerful set of skills himself, even within the D rank. Kim pointed towards the altar with his sword. "The final law, prove your piety. And there's an altar appearing out of nowhere in the middle of this place." Kim's gaze then shifted to Jinwoo. "So aren't we supposed to offer up a sacrifice, Mr. Seong?" Jinwoo slowly nodded his head. That was what the youth thought as well. One of the surviving 6 had to act as a sacrifice. That's what the last law probably meant. Jinwoo came to this conclusion. He sensed more disturbance and raised his head, and realized that the eyes of Mr. Kim as he approached closer did not look friendly at all. A long sweat drop glided down Jinwoo's forehead. "Ah, Juicy." "What?" "You, young man, don't say anything and be still." Kim angrily shouted out and pointed his sword at Mr. Song, who was squatting next to Jinwoo in order to check out the youth's condition. Just who was it that dragged us to this place? Wasn't it this guy? Yes, it was Mr. Song. So don't you think it's only right for Mr. Song to take the ultimate responsibility? "Ah, Juicy." Jinwoo tried to get up in a fit of anger, but then Song's hand that resembled the bark of an aged tree stopped the youth. Jinwoo looked at Song in disbelief. Song wordlessly shook his head. His eyes were pleading with Jinwoo, asking the youth to not say anything else. Of course, Jinwoo had lots of things to say, but he kept them down for now. Song slowly raised his body up. "What Mr. Kim said is right. I should take the blame for today. Old man, I guess we are now finally on the same page." Kim used the tip of his sword to point towards the altar. If you get it now, then let's get going already. Over 10 people died here because of you, old man. One of the dead hunters today happened to be Mr. Park, a personal friend to Mr. Kim. Exploring the dual dungeon was decided with the vote involving everyone, but Kim had already erased that memory off his head after losing much of his reasoning. Mr. Song spoke to Kim. I'd like to walk on my own volition, so can you put the sword away? Of course, Kim refused right away. How can I trust you, old man? Stop wasting time and start moving already. Song sighed softly under his breath and walked towards the altar. Kim pointed his sword at the older man's back and followed on afterwards. Jin Woo bit his lower lip while watching the two men walk away. This isn't the fault of Mr. Song. More than half of the group agreed to do it together. Just because things had gone south, blaming Song for everything was simply too cowardly, he thought. But Jin Woo unfortunately did not possess enough strength to stop Kim here. Kim, thought to be one of the best among the rank D, and Seong Jin Woo, easily the worst of the rank E. The difference in their strengths was all too clear for him to see. Not only that, Jin Woo had even lost a leg. If he tried to confront Kim as he was now, there was a chance that him and even Ju Hui, who had been focusing solely on healing him, could meet with disaster. Dang Jin Woo squeezed his eyes shut. He never hated his own powerlessness as much as he did today. In the meantime, Song had stepped up on the raised altar. Suddenly, a red flame lit up near the outer perimeter of the altar as soon as he did. Everyone nervously swallowed their saliva and observed the unfolding situation carefully. However, nothing else happened. Just a single flame came to life, and that was it. They waited for a while, but there was no visible change at all. Not only Kim, but everyone else got flustered by this situation. Kim quickly turned his head and spoke to Jin Woo. Look here, Mr. Seong, this wasn't it? Jin Woo also shook his head. Even I. He too thought that once a person chosen as the sacrifice stepped up on the altar, the third law of prove one's piety would be completed. It's not about offering up a sacrifice? If so, then it was not necessarily bad news. If the law was not about sacrifices, then it meant Mr. Song could still saved. Jin Woo's expression brightened somewhat. He sweated bucket loads as he tried to stand up, and two hunters nearby quickly lent their assistance. Please take me closer to the altar so I can study it. Mr. Jin Woo, your injuries are... Ju Hui also got up from her spot to follow after Jin Woo. Her complexion was rather pale after expending too much of her magical energy. But because she had worked so hard, Jin Woo's blood loss had been temporarily halted and the pain he felt was reduced to a barely noticeable degree. I gotta hurry up. The current condition of Ju Hui, Kim's boiling rage, Song's injuries, and the frightened hunters. He didn't have a lot of time here. Jin Woo eventually arrived at the altar with the help from other hunters. Let's climb up on the altar. The two hunters flinched from his statement, but they trusted Jin Woo and stepped up. Then 3 more flames lit up. Right away, Jin Woo's eyes gleamed brightly. It's the same number as the people on the altar. Mr. Song and Jin Woo, plus 2 others who helped the youth. Indeed, the flames lit up to match the number of people standing on the altar. And it kind of looked like that these 4 flames were drawing a circle outside the altar. If I take into consideration the space between the flames, 2 more will complete the circle. It seemed that all the remaining people had to climb up on the altar for something, anything to get started. Jin Woo turned his head to ask Song, if we wait here, do you think other hunters will come to rescue us? Song shook his head. Today is the 7th day since the gate showed up. These things will start moving first before the help arrives. Because it's a gate-ranked D, I see that it's been left alone for far too long. Well, that's how the association operates, isn't it? A gate would open up fully after the 7th day. The real meaning of a raid was to kill the dungeon's boss monster, and therefore close the gate before that happened. When failing to do so, the monsters trapped in the dungeons would be set free from the dungeon, and they would be able to roam the outside world. Jinwoo looked behind him. The giant god statue was still looking down on them with an overbearing, arrogant expression from its throne. If that thing manages to go outside, then the ensuing chaos would be unimaginable. Of course, before that happened, hunters coming to this chamber to rescue them would all be killed by the statues first. He was now sure of the fact that they could not wait here forever. Jinwoo called out to Juhui and Kim. "Both of you, climb up." Juhui stepped up on the altar first. The hesitant Kim also followed suit soon afterwards. 2 more flames lit up and the circle was now complete. And then hunters were grandly stunned by what happened next. What the hell? What's going on here? As Jinwoo had suspected, yet another change took place. It's coming. From the outermost edge of the altar, small blue flames floated upwards and began drawing a circle of their own as well. There looked to be at least 30 of these blue flames, placed real tightly next to each other. Jinwoo quickly counted them all as the blue flames completed the circle, and he realized that there were 36 of them. The 6 red flames that lit up to match the number of people, and the 36 blue flames that appeared outside them. What could be the significance behind that number? It was then, without a warning, the resolutely shut door suddenly opened up wide. Hunters reflexively flinched. They all wanted so bad to run towards the wide-open doorway, but having seen the final moments of the choirboy hunter, they found it hard to take the first step. If one tried to be the first, just who knew what might happen to them? Everyone's gaze fixed on Jinwoo as if to demand an answer from him. However, Jinwoo's lips remained tightly shut. He couldn't come up with a guess at the moment. He didn't know whether the open door was a trap, or they were now allowed to go out after they upheld the final law successfully. Too bad for him, just as everyone was looking at Jinwoo, a horrifying noise filled up the entire chamber. The heads of all 6 hunters quickly snapped around to look. What was that? It's coming closer. Those dumb things are all moving now. Hunter's breathing quickened in an instant. The stone statues that had only moved when a person got near were now several steps closer to the group. Jinwoo only needed a short moment to figure out what happened, of course. No, the statues didn't move. It's the plinths below them that moved. That horrifying screech from earlier on most likely came from the plinths beneath the statues grating against the stone floor. They are not moving anymore? Kim wiped the droplets of sweat on his forehead as he spoke. While everyone was still staring at the statues, Jinwoo's focus was on the blue flames. They had been going out one by one, and 3 of them had flickered out of existence already. Hearing that screech, someone cried out. What was that? Where did it come from? Jinwoo quickly raised his head. The noise had come from his general direction. The stone statues facing him had moved a little bit closer. Why only my side? Was it because he looked at somewhere else briefly? In order to confirm, Jinwoo closed his eyes. The noise resounded out again. As soon as he opened his eyes, the noise stopped. What the fuck is going on here? What are we supposed to do about this? Jinwoo quickly shouted at others. Don't take your eyes off the statues, no matter what. When he thought about it, he realized that the statues first began moving closer to the group when others were busy looking at him. They creep closer when we are not looking at them. It was right then, another blue flame disappeared. However, there was still no discernible change to either the group or the statues. Could it be? Cautiously raising his arm, Jinwoo did his best not to take his eyes off the statues while checking the time with his wristwatch. As I thought. At an interval of 1 minute, a blue flame was being extinguished. The blue flames are the timer. It was quite likely that one of the main points of the 3rd law was to stay within the altar until all 36 blue flames died out. In other words, as long as everyone was keeping close watch on the statues, they'd be safe. It was quite possible that no one had to die at this final huddle. Wanting to be more accurate about the remaining time, Jinwoo began recounting the number of blue flames once more. There are 30 remaining. They only needed to endure 30 more minutes. Unfortunately, Jin Woo made a huge mistake just then. While he was counting the number of blue flames, his eyes wandered away for a brief moment, and that resulted in the statues creeping closer. The man standing on the opposite side screamed and ran towards the door. He simply couldn't hold on any longer as the horrifying screeching noise coming from his back frightened him so much. As soon as he left the altar, one of the red flames disappeared. "No!" Jinwoo cried out urgently. However, the man running as if he had gone crazy escaped through the open doorway without meeting a grisly fate, which took everyone by surprise. What? What the hell? Mr. Seong, what's going on? That guy made it out alive. Kim shouted out, flustered. Jinwoo was standing with his back to the doorway, so he couldn't really tell what was going on. Did something change? The door has closed just a little. The door's closing? No. After that guy left, the door moved a little bit, but then stopped. Jinwoo then recalled one of the red flames disappearing as soon as that man left the altar. He immediately felt his heart go cold. One of the questions that he couldn't quite figure out until now as he stood on top of this altar finally had an answer. How could standing on an altar be a proof of one's piety? Indeed, he now had the answer to this quandary. And that answer was probably the worst one for Jinwoo, who had only one leg now and needed others' help just to keep his balance. That open doorway was a trap, a false hope right in front of one's eyes. If people saw the open door and climbed off the altar at the same time, the red flames would have gone out and the doorway would be closed shut again. And then, the banquet of raining blood and screams would inevitably follow next. On the other hand, the altar was the proverbial promised land. If each one did what they had to do in their positions until the timer ran out, then their survival would be guaranteed. So it was between the false hope right in front of one's eyes or the unseen promise of salvation. The third law was a test to see if one could defend one's position without falling into the sweet temptation over yonder while constantly being under the encroaching threat of death. However, two flies in the ointment happened in this situation. The first one was Jinwoo. Originally, the remaining group of people would have ran straight for the open door, but they stopped first to listen to what Jinwoo had to say, and that helped them avoid the trap being sprung in the first place. We got lucky there. Indeed, that had to be the only explanation. Such a thing was only possible because Jinwoo managed to figure out the first two laws all by himself and earn the trust of others. Unfortunately for him, the second fly also happened. Something he didn't foresee. A deserter had appeared among their midst. How would human beings react when there was a hope of survival right in front of their eyes? It was way too obvious. The man helping Jinwoo up abandoned the youth and bolted as well. Song hurriedly reached out and propped Jinwoo up from his back. Poof. When that man left the altar, yet another red flame disappeared, and as expected, the door closed a little bit more. Kim dazedly pointed at the second deserter, but just like the first person to abandon them, he too safely escaped past the doorway. Jinwoo confirmed the number of remaining red flames and shouted out, "We must not move! Any more than this, then it'll be the end." Front, back, left, and right. In order to secure all four directions, 4 people were the bare minimum required. Jinwoo himself, Juhui, Mr. Song, and finally Mr. Kim. A single person leaving now would result in a gap within the field of vision. Kim wiped the sweat off his forehead and asked urgently, "Mr. Seong, just what is going on here? Explain it to me properly." "We'll make it as long as we wait here, only until all the blue flames are extinguished." Jinwoo spat out everything he had deduced so far. Kim nodded his head as his ears perked up. Jinwoo quickly ended his explanation and added one more thing at the end. "Remember, everyone here can get out of here alive. The laws of this chamber always left open a path for one's survival. The final law would not deviate from that." Jinwoo was certain of no one else needing to die as long as the remaining people trusted each other. Too bad. Kim's thoughts were quite different from the youth's. The older hunter asked hesitantly, "Look here, Mr. Seong. You could be right on this one, but could the door close shut instead when the timer runs out?" Jinwoo couldn't answer that one. He came to his conclusion after considering several variables, but until the result was in, he couldn't be 100% certain of anything. However, what Kim wanted was a definite assurance. Rather than an uncertain promise of everyone's survival, the definite survival of his own self had proved to be far more alluring in the end. "I'm sorry about this, but I don't think I can stay here anymore." "Ah, juicy." "Sorry." With that parting word, Kim stepped down from the altar. He then ignored Jinwoo's urgent calling and ran towards the door. He stopped and looked for a brief moment just outside the door, but Kim did not step back inside the chamber again. Jinwoo gritted his teeth. He had saved the lives of others, but what he got in return was definitely not something like gratefulness or friendship. His entire body shuddered from the pain of betrayal. Just as he suspected as soon as Kim had abandoned them, a gap within the surveillance had been created. It was impossible for 3 people to guard all 4 directions. And so, the statues positioned in the blind spots began creeping closer to the altar. The encirclement of the stone statue was gradually tightening. Song took a look around and then spoke to Jinwoo and Juhui. "Both of you, you should leave now." His voice was full of resignation. Jinwoo looked at the old man. "But Juicy, just as Kim had said, I was the one who dragged us all in here. If someone has to remain behind, then it'd be only right that I'm the one. You two with a better future ahead of you should be the ones to survive today." Song began smiling then. He was thinking of these 2 young people's hearts as they would have to abandon him here. Jinwoo helplessly nodded his head. He was uncomfortable about this whole thing, but there was no time left to argue back and forth who should remain in here. Song then tried to ask Ju Hui to take care of Jinwoo. "Miss Ju Hui, can you help out Mr. Seong here for a bit?" "Yes." However, just as she was about to prop him up, Ju Hui plopped down to the floor. "Ah!" Ju Hui tried to get up, but then tears began forming around the edges of her eyes. "My legs. I can't move my legs." Both the expressions of Jinwoo and Mr. Song hardened in an instant. Ju Hui's current physical condition did look terrible, even from a casual glance. Her lips were in the shade of pale blue, while her entire body continued to tremble ever so imperceptibly. She was suffering from the side effects of overusing her magic energy when she was already at her physical limit. "Because she tried to heal my leg." Jinwoo felt his chest tighten and couldn't say anything. However, they really didn't have any time left now. The stone statues were relentlessly approaching them without a moment of rest even now. Jinwoo shoved Song's hand away and plopped down to the ground himself. Seeing this, Song's eyes grew wider. "Young man?" Jinwoo spoke up with a determined expression on his face. "Ajusi, please take Ju Hui and get out of this place." "I told you, I'll be the one staying behind." "In that case, who's going to help Ju Hui?" It was pretty much impossible for him to take Ju Hui, who couldn't even stand properly, and leave through the door within the time limit. Of course. There was the other choice of abandoning Ju Hui behind as well. However, Ju Hui had saved his life several times already, and the only reason why she was in this state was because she tried to help him with all her might. He definitely did not want to suffer the guilty conscience of abandoning such a person behind in this God-forsaken place. "There is no time left. Please leave now." Song's expression remained hardened as he helped Ju Hui up. She shook her head desperately while tears streamed down on her face. "No, you can't. Mr. Jinwoo can still survive, you know." "Let me." "I promised to buy you a dinner, didn't I?" Jinwoo pulled out the rank E-magic crystal from his pocket and placed it in her hand. "Please, use this and enjoy one on me. When I get out of here, I'll be coming around to collect the change, you see." A smile formed on Jinwoo's face. prompting Juhui to cry out in anger. How can you crack a joke in this situation, Mr. Jinwoo? It was at this moment that Jinwoo signaled to Mr. Song with a nod. The older man then lightly chopped on the back of Juhui's neck. With that, Juhui lost her consciousness. Song picked up the unconscious girl and placed her over his shoulder. I'm really sorry about this. This is my choice, so it's fine. Mr. Song bowed his head to Jinwoo. With that goodbye, Song quickly left the altar. During the time the three of them were chatting, the statues had arrived at the proverbial stone's throw away. Jinwoo got on his knees and took several deep breaths. He spotted the sword Kim had left behind next to him, so he reached out and picked it up. Now that it had come down to this, I'll take at least one down with me. When he looked behind him, Jinwoo saw Mr. Song safely leaving through the doorway with unconscious Ju Hui still perched upon his shoulder. What a relief that was. Only I'll die here now. He wasn't doing this because of some noble determination to sacrifice himself or anything like that. No, there certainly was an element of him calculating the best possible outcome in his decision. Even if he survived and got out of here today, he would have to live as a cripple for the rest of his life. Obviously, carrying on as a hunter would be impossible then, and it was also questionable whether he'd be able to live normally as well. He was only a high school graduate, and since he didn't have any discernible job skills, he simply didn't have too many options left to put food on the table. Mom's hospital fees, and my sister's school fees too. If that were the case, then he might as well make sure his family would receive a better compensation from the association, even if it was just a single cent more. Was the compensation paid out to the family members 300 million won, or 400,000, when one dies during a raid? That was a huge amount for a worthless life of a rank E hunter. Finally, the statues arrived. The first one to arrive climbed up on the altar. Jinwoo glared at it and lifted the sword up. Come! A long spear penetrated into Jinwoo's back and exited out of his chest. Jinwoo spat out a mouthful of blood. An unimaginable amount of pain rushed in like a tsunami wave. If you were stabbed a couple of inches higher, you'd have a hole in your heart by now. Ju Hui's nagging he heard only a few hours ago slipped past his mind like a scene from a revolving lantern. The stone statue lifted up the spear. Jinwoo was lifted up along into the air, still pierced through by that spear. He only got to struggle for a brief moment, though, because the statue slammed him down on the altar. Sounds of bones breaking could be heard from all corners of his body. He shrunk away from the intense pain. As he began trembling, the stone statues slowly surrounded him. They formed an encirclement around him. Jinwoo raised his head and glared at them, his entire being shuddering nonstop. I don't want to die like this. Now that he was facing his final moments, tears pooled on his eyes. He recalled the faces of his family. He even recalled the face of Ju Hui, her face full of anxiety and worry for his safety. I don't want to die. He didn't want to end his short 24 years of life in this place. The stone statue wielding a sword took a step closer without a hint of emotion. Then, it raised its sword up high. Even though he was shaking hard, Jinwoo did not avert his gaze away from this beastard. Finally, the statue's sword slashed down. Only if I had one more chance. Jinwoo's eyes shot open wider. It happened then. Statue's movement suddenly stopping, as if someone had pressed the pause button. The scarily fast-moving sword suddenly stopped in midair. No, that wasn't actually correct. It hadn't stopped at all. It simply had slowed down so much that he ended up thinking that way. 1 millimeter in 1 minute? It was very slow, but the sword was still definitely coming down. What's going on here? Jinwoo couldn't hide his astonishment. It was then a voice of a female he had never heard of before resounded within his head. Completion requirements for the secret quest, The Courage of the Powerless, has been met. Secret quest? Completion requirements were met? Jinwoo couldn't understand any of that. No, hang on a minute. Besides all that, where did that voice come from? Too bad for him, the voice ignored Jinwoo's questions and continued on regardless. You have acquired the rights to become a player. Will you accept? He had acquired a right. Accept what exactly? Sounds like I'll be given something. He grew up dirt poor since his childhood, so he had never refused freebies until now. However, that was a story for when he was still alive. What use was there for free stuff when he was dead? When Jinwoo hesitated and didn't answer, the voice in his head asked again as if to urge him on. There's not enough time left for you to make your decision. Your heart will cease functioning precisely 0.02 seconds after you refuse to accept. Will you accept? He couldn't tell whether he was hallucinating or not, but he still got to figure out that he was only a moment away from dying for good. He finally spotted countless other weapons headed in his direction. Beside that Deem sword, that was how. Now that the things had devolved to such a degree, he might as well. If you're giving it to me, then just give it to me already. There was no need to utter anything out at all. He simply thought about it in his head. Even then, the voice of the female replied to him immediately. Congratulations on becoming a player! Flash! A blinding light suddenly wrapped around Jinwoo's body, and at the same time, he lost his consciousness. He opened his eyes. He saw a white ceiling, and his nose stung from the odor of disinfectants. He also felt the sensation of a hard mattress against his back. Jinwoo immediately recognized where he was. A hospital. Ever since he met the rank B healer Ju Hui, the frequency of him staying in one had decreased somewhat, but still, hospitals were familiar places for Jinwoo, just as he'd be with a local convenience store. So much so that he even heard a rumor of there being a special seat reserved for himself at the Hunter's Hospital, too. Jinwoo raised his upper torso up. He then placed his hand on his chest and felt the vibrations coming from there. His heart was beating without a problem. I survived? It wasn't only that, though. Unlike before, his entire being felt light and airy. He'd be feeling heavy-headed and fatigued whenever he woke up from a hospital bed. But it was a different story now. No, it was as if he had woken up in his own bed after a night of a good rest. What's going on? This shouldn't have been possible when he thought back to the moments before he lost his consciousness. A sword was falling on his head right before his eyes. To be continued. If the video is deleted, it will remain in the BOOSTY Mojo English dub, or if you want to support my endeavors, please subscribe to my BOOSTY in the description. Mojo English dub.